All right, we'll be getting started in just a short moment.
This is going to be
All right, how are we all doing today?
good.
All right. Well, my name is Christian. I'm joined up here by Nick. This is going to be our cannon firing demonstration. Before I get to the loading and the firing of this piece, I'd like to talk a little bit about these uniforms you see us wearing, what this cannon is doing up here, and then we'll get to the loading and the firing. So to start off, me and Nick are both wearing the dress uniform of the U.S. Army in the 1880s, more specifically that of the 23rd Infantry. Now, they would have been stationed here at Fort Mackinac from about 1884 until 1890. And while they're here, they're at least in theory acting as the caretakers of Mackinac National Park. That was our nation's second national park. It was located right here on Mackinac Island from 1875 until 1895 when it was transferred to the state of Michigan. However, they're only going to be the caretakers of that park in theory. In all reality, they are still active duty soldiers and had a very long list of things they had to do before they got to that national park. That could be things like fatigue detail, doing manual labor and chores, drill down on the parade ground, practicing marching, manual of arms, or bayonet practice, or guard detail. And it's guard detail that's going to come into play up here on the cannon platform, as it is the guard detail that's firing cannons like this one off at least twice a day. And when they're firing these guns, they're not firing any live cannonballs over here. Believe it or not, well, Mackinac Island is a national park. It's just as touristy then as it is now. And tourists don't tend to appreciate live ordnance flying over their heads. They would be firing what's called a salute shot. So that would be just black powder wrapped up in a charge, rammed down the barrel, and set off to celebrate something. That's what we're going to be firing today. They'd fire these salute shots once again at least twice a day. Once in the morning with the raising of the flag at reveille, and once in the evening with the lowering of the flag at retreat, bookmarking the beginning and the end of a soldier's workday. Now, they'll be firing these for more special occasions as well, such as on federal holidays like the 4th of July or Memorial Day. They'd be firing what's called a national salute. So that is one shot for each state in the Union. Back in the 1880s, there would have been 38 states. So they would have fired guns like this off 38 times at the crack of dawn. So that would have been a loud announcement for the 4th of July. However, they're also firing these guns off on more solemn occasions, such as in 1885, in 1885, when President and General Ulysses S. Grant passed away, he would receive a 13-gun salute in the morning, followed by a shot every half hour throughout the working day. And they would close that day off with yet another one of those national salutes. And the cannon they're firing for all of this wouldn't have been too dissimilar to this one. This is a reproduction of a model 1841 6-pound smoothbore field gun. Now, those of you who are listening closely might realize that I said we are dressed as soldiers from the 1880s, 1840s cannon. It's about a 40-year difference. And during those 40 years, artillery technology advanced fairly rapidly, to a point where the U.S. Army by the 1880s has access to breech-loading artillery that's rifled, firing these explosive shells instead of cannonballs. Meanwhile, this has none of that. This is a smoothbore gun that's muzzle-loading. It's firing solid cast iron balls. So overall, it's going to be less accurate, have less of a range, less destructive. But the Army deems these good enough for Fort Mackinac. Now, that's not because Fort Mackinac is destined to be invaded and they just don't want to deal with it anymore, but instead because it's a national park. You don't need the most modern artillery to defend a national park. The Army believed those modern guns could be better placed somewhere else, and that Fort Mackinac would be served just well enough with these old Mexican-American War surplus guns, as all they needed to do was to fire salute shots, which this gun was, and still is today, more than capable of. I figure at this point we might as well get to the loading and the firing of this. How's that sound? Hey. We're firing a cannon off here, people. With my ego only partially restored, we'll start the loading process. However, the first part of the loading process is for me to take my gloved thumb and put it over this touch hole in the back. This is going to prevent any air from moving through the cannon during the loading process. And Nick is going to take the auger, or the gunner's worm. He's going to send that down the barrel here. Now that's going to fish out any loose debris that may be left inside the cannon. If that's flaming debris, we want to take it out of the cannon. Now he's going to take a cool tool called the wet sponge. It's a sheep's wool sponge on the end of a long stick. And he's going to send that down the barrel. And that's going to introduce moisture, and with the help of my thumb, create a vacuum so there's no oxygen in the gun. That thwomp is the vacuum collapsing. Since fire needs oxygen to breathe and there was no oxygen in the gun, we are confident that there is no fire in the gun. So it is safe to load our charge of about 5 ounces of black powder. He's now going to ram that down using the other end of the sponge called a rammer. Make sure it's firmly seated underneath my thumb. And with him stepping out of the barrel, it is safe to remove my thumb. And now we can start the priming process. So he's going to take a long wire called the priming wire. He's going to send that down the hole I was covering, and that's going to punch a hole in that charge. That way it can be set off by our ignition device. And our ignition device today is the same one they would have had in the 1840s and the 1880s. It's called a friction primer. It's a small copper tube with a little bit of black powder inside of it, and on top is a black goopy substance called fulminate of mercury. Now, fulminate of mercury is incredibly susceptible to friction. So when we pull that pin, it's going to create friction. It's going to set off a spark that'll set off the black powder inside the primer, and that will then set off the black powder in our charge. However, now he's attached a lanyard so we can pull the pin from a safe distance, and it is at this point that my contract legally requires me to remind you, this is a cannon. You might find it to be a little bit loud. So I encourage you to either join me in plugging your ears or press record on your cameras, wherever your priorities are in life. And at this point, there are 2 commands left to give. They are ready, fire! Woo. And that is our cannon firing demonstration. Folks, if you have any questions at all, we will be up here on the cannon platform. But whichever way you go, thanks for coming out to Fort Mackinac today. We appreciate